So Labor needs 7 to win it outright. And the way the polls are going, if you want to believe the polls, they look like they're an absolute shoo-in to jag those 7 seats. But this sandbagging, they call it, protecting marginal seats, you've just got to question whether the coalition are going to be able to do enough to throw public money, your money and mine, to hold on to seats in those 7 key seats.
And here on The Flow, the morning show, it is time for us to head to federal politics. What we will be doing for the next 6 weeks is covering the key issues as the federal election campaign unfolds. With me is Rikki Lambert. And Rikki, it's good to have your company.
Yeah, it's great to be here, Wayne. Some political tragics like you and I, we get excited. It's a bit like Christmas in a way. It's pretty tragic.
Probably not quite as exciting. I think Easter might be just as exciting coming up. But after Easter, it will be on in earnest. But what about the timing? I'm going to ask you about why Scott Morrison may have called the federal election just before Easter. Couldn't he have waited for the kids to get their Easter eggs out of the way, or is this part of a few little Easter eggs that are going to be given to us?
Oh, look, Wayne, I think we've seen this in South Australia, for instance, where they have a locked-in election date. A lot of states do. Just around March, when there's a lot of festivals and carnivals, the old bread and circuses trick, I think it's, while people are feeling good, I think you'll have a lot of feel-good events going on all the way until May.
All right, let's have a look at what the key issues may be, because we have Anthony Albanese and Scott Morrison both in rural areas. Are they getting some of the rural marginal seats out of the way early, and then in the latter part of the campaign we'll see them in some of these Melbourne and maybe Sydney-based seats where they think they can win the election?
Yeah, I think they're taking out some of the early seats that are probably not going to see them again for the rest of the campaign. The only parts of regional Australia I'm tipping that you'll see Scott Morrison and Anthony Albanese in are the coastal seats in Queensland, which are marginal, and northern Tasmania, which is also marginal, which is a bit of a lesson for those who keep voting the same way every time in our broadcast states in southern New South Wales, Victoria and regional South Australia.
I think we've seen a change of government from opposition 6 times since the Second World War, 3 to the Coalition and 3 to Labor. If Labor were to win from opposition this time around, it would be the 4th time they've done so. So what do they need to do that to unseat the government?
Well, there's about 7 seats that Labor needs to jag. The Coalition needs to kind of pick up one more, which is not likely to happen. So Labor needs 7 to win it outright. And the way the polls are going, if you want to believe the polls, they look like they're an absolute shoo-in to jag those 7 seats. But this sandbagging, they call it, protecting marginal seats, you've just got to question whether the coalition are going to be able to do enough to throw public money, your money and mine, to hold on to seats in those 7 key seats.
Okay, Anthony Albanese has been talking about having manufacturing come back to Australia. But there were Labor governments, particularly of the 80s, where manufacturing left Australia. How can he get the resources and also, if you like, the policy development around both workers to work in manufacturing, but also around the kinds of businesses to invest in that in Australia to actually pull that policy off?
Well, I think we've got to be clear here. I give a big tick to the Coalition for the management of the economy up to this point. We've staved off recession. We've had recession, but not as bad as other countries have. The question is the vision thing, as Bill Clinton used to call it. What's the vision for the next term in terms of how we manage the economy? And Labor talking about wanting Australia to be a country that makes things again. It's a trite statement, but I think that's a sentiment a lot of Australians, especially in regional Australia, want to support. How are they going to achieve that? I mean, that's the big question. But one thing I don't think we'll see, but would be an interesting play, is what we saw incoming Premier Peter Malinauskas play in South Australia. A number of apologies to people about gutting manufacturing in South Australia, like the forestry that was they sold the forest to build a stadium expansion at Adelaide Oval, and he apologised to voters in that area, and it seemed to work a treat. So maybe that's part of what Anthony Albanese needs to do.
All right, it's a very interesting campaign. The issues of water, the issues of climate, following through on agriculture, and too we'll be looking at the wider range of seats that we cover here on Flow. We're looking forward to a federal election, and we'll be covering it each day here on The Flow.